Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and this is the summary for the day of 992 for the 11th of November. And major developments over the past 24 hours, the Russians indeed have started a new offensive, and the direction of this offensive is over in the Velyka Novosilka sector of the Donetsk front. So this is Velyka Novosilka, and the Russians have launched a major offensive across this entire front line around here, with attack towards Makariivka being reported. And the Russians, according to the Ukrainian mapping, have also shown massive captures towards Rivnopil. They have re-entered Rivnopil. Previously, this was under Russian control during the Ukrainian 2023 counteroffensive. And it's 2023. Oh my God, so long has passed, man. And the Russians also have almost entered Novodarivka. There is also fighting, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, near the region of Zelene Pole, and shelling is being reported around here by the Russian Defense Ministry, including Temerivka. Fighting is also reported towards Novosilka, Velyka Novosilka. So we're going to zoom in a little bit regarding this sector around here, because this is the area where the Russians are making huge progress. So I'm tentatively calling this the Velyka Novosilka offensive. A bit of a mouthful, but there's always something in my mouth, seemingly, when I talk. So over in the Rivnopil, you can see that the Ukrainian side, Ukrainian mapping, have conceded huge amount of grounds, with Russian making huge progress, capturing 2/3 of Rivnopil already, and they have launched this attack. I'm not sure if it's a sudden attack per se. The last attack being reported at Rivnopil was more than 10 days ago. So this comes as pretty much of a surprise. However, it's not entirely nothing, because there was shelling reported over in Zelene Pole in yesterday's situation report, including Temerivka as well. So the Russians have been bombarding the rear positions of the Ukrainian forces, where the Ukrainians probably have this is where their operational base, the 4 operating positions are, and the Russians just basically just punched in. So this is the current here. Over in Novodarivka, the Russians are just nearby. They just near this village, and the Russians have basically have 2 attacking positions. So this is how a proper offensive look like usually, because the first initial punch is usually very, very powerful, and it will usually break the defender's defense line, at least the first line of defense. So if they doesn't, then the offensive is just a failure. So this is the important thing to note. The Ukrainian mapping by the Deep State UA basically only mentioned about Makariivka. However, and then they marked that the Russians have captured this area, although these have already been marked as under Russian control a long time ago. So this is one of these major things. So we carry on over in the Donetsk front, because there's more major news coming over in this sector, particularly over in the Kurakhove region, where the Russian forces made a huge progress, as the Russian forces is now geolocated inside of the Ukrainian HQ at Kurakhove. The South Donbass HQ for the Ukrainians is most likely located here. You can see the massive amount of defense line protecting this settlement, with the water body on the top, protecting the northern flank. The Russians have entered from the east, and this is a disaster with and the southern flank is also becoming more and more irrelevant, with the latest mapping suggesting that the Russians have taken the most of this eastern part of this Kurakhove-Dane line, and the Russians have been also geolocated inside of Dane itself. They have entered into Dane, and this is the northeastern part of Dane, as the Russians continue to punch in one straight line down the tree line and enter into the north. It's unclear if the Russians actually taken this entire eastern part of Dane, because it would require the Russians to run through the entire field to reach that site in the northeast. A more logical way of attack would probably to be attacking into the eastern part and then head north, but that would be very sudden, right? For the Russians to enter here and go up north, that would mean that the Ukrainians aren't defending at all. But it seems like the Ukrainian defenders here is extremely low motivated. We are looking at no huge amount of grounds lost. Like the Russians are progressing really quickly across this sector. There is definitely defenders around, but the numbers could be actually pretty low. In the Uspenivka region, the Russians are attacking at Maximivka towards Sukiali. This Sukiali was mentioned by the Russian Defense Ministry. So this is definitely happening right now with the Russians pushing up north, and fighting is reported at Trudove. Some of these frontline changes is already mentioned. This is the new one, with Russian mapping claiming a straightened front line in the east of Bohovivlenka. Ukrainian Defense Ministry continued to mention about fighting at Katerinivka, Antonivka, and Konstantinivka. So, with the Kurakhove, Dane, and the Ukrainians still talking about Maximilianivka. So this is the current situation over in this sector, in around all around Uspenivka. And yeah, things is looking horrible for the Ukrainians over this sector. And since we are around here, well, let's go up north towards the I would say the in-between region between the Pokrovsk sector and the Donetsk front, the Pokrovsk front and the Donetsk front. Around this north of Kurakhove, Russian forces have made advance around Novoselidivka, and they are also continuing to push at Kreminna, Balka, Vosnevsenka, Ilinka, Sonsivka. Sonsivka is now corroborated by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. They are mentioning Sonsivka right now. Fighting is reported at Novodimitrivka, and the forces are now heading towards Zoria. And as I mentioned before, this is dangerous. If the Russians push down from Sonsivka and taking Staditany, then we are looking at a massive encirclement of Ukrainian forces in the north of Kurakhove reservoir. So this is a pretty critical. We are talking about a lot of critical problems everywhere for the Ukrainians. There is no good news everywhere. Everywhere is horrible. The Russians are really honing their skills in tactic and strategy. They are now reviving, bringing back their World War II level of operational efficiency. The Russians are horrible in the beginning of the war. You have to understand, the Ukraine war is really literally training the Russian commanders, and they are rooting out all the corrupted and lousy officers as we speak. As this war goes by, they are starting to identify who are capable, who are full of shit, and this is currently happening in real time. And it is kind of a really bad news for people who are like pro West, like me. I'm actually pro West, and which is a surprise for a lot of people because like I don't support Ukraine. But why support Ukraine? That is nothing to do with me. So, but people get conflated, get brainwashed, and that's just how it is. Ukraine is a bad news for the collective West, and yeah. But so far, people just prefer to get what it is, what it is. Fighting is now around Selidove is just as bad, with the Russian forces making huge progress. There is fighting reported towards Ukrainka already, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. There is fighting reported at Selidove region, with the Ukrainian Defense Ministry saying that this is actually the highest intensity around Selidove. Although the front line have already left Selidove, I wonder if it's mentioning as an entirety of the front line around here. So there is also fighting reported at Kharkovivka, Petrievka, Pustinka. Pustinka is actually the first time we saw the naming of this settlement in our reports, and Yurievka and Novoalexievka, and there is fighting reported in the south of Novoalexievka based on the frontline changes. Geolocation of a Ukrainian Leopard 1 tank was hit by a FPV drone. It's unclear if it's destroyed or not, and anything south of here is actually what we already mentioned, Novodimitrivka, and the other one is Zoria. So if we zoom in a bit, let's you can see that around Yurievka, the Russian forces have basically entered from the southeast, from the Novoalexievka direction towards Yurievka, and in the south, the Russian forces also have made progress with the capture of more of the tree lines in the south, fully securing the southern flank for Novoalexievka. So this is actually pretty important. Like I said, there is no good news. Everything is shit for the Ukrainians. And over in the Pokrovsk sector, this is Pokrov. This is the very, 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 very important objective. This is strategically extremely important for the Donetsk, for the Ukrainian Donetsk control. Russian forces are attacking at Promin, Minokhrad, Krutia, as well as Lysyivka. So this remains to be the same. The front line here remains to be pretty static. There's no front line change, given that the Ukrainian lines are extremely supported with two major cities supporting the front line around here. So this is still pretty safe, and there is railway leading up to Pokrovsk. So the railway lines will be able to be continued to send food, troops, and ammunition if it's still workable. There is no news regarding whether the train network is actually down in this area or not. At least I didn't see it. In the northern sector of the Pokrovsk front, the Russian forces are pushing at Myryolybivka and Vozdvizhenka. So otherwise, there's no much change around in this sector. And because we go straight to Donetsk region first. There is also major news at the Kharkiv front, but I will cover that as the last front line. So stay tuned. Major news over in that sector. Massive. If you're pro-Russian, you will love it. But if you're pro-Ukrainians, you can actually don't watch it. It's horrible news. Over in the Kherson front, there is still Ukrainian Defense Ministry mentioning about the fighting in the Pridniprovsky direction. In this area here, but there is shelling reported at Komishany, Mikilsky, and Lvove. Now, not very important per se. Kherson front tentatively is not the major front line that the Russians will be focusing on. However, it's a bit more difficult to say about the Zaporizhzhia front. This is the Zaporizhzhia front, and in the Kharkiv sector, there is continued Russian actions or activities over in the southwest of Kharkiv, with the Russians now fighting in the area of Novoandrievka and Novodanilivka, generally in the direction of Kharkiv. So there is still continued operations around here. The Russians are talking about Novodanilivka. The Ukrainians are talking about Novoandrievka. So it's unclear where exactly the direction, but it seems like the entire front line here is pretty swollen. So we shall see how this continue to go. Whether this will develop into some kind of a major offensive, just like the Velyka Novosilka offensive. So something to take note of. After the Kherson front, we already covered the Donetsk and Pokrovsk. Let's go to the New York front. At the New York front, there is updates from the Ukrainian mapping. They finally considered a huge chunk of the center part of Nelipivka, according to the mapping from Deep State UA. However, this continues to be very weird. As if you look at the Russian and the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, they have not talked about Nelipivka for most of the time. The fighting is largely being mentioned. It's about Skibinivka. As you can see, Russian Defense Ministry and Ukrainian Defense Ministry both talk about Skibinivka, and of course Toretsk, where is the other front line where the Russians are making major actions. Nelipivka is not really part of the equation right now somehow, but the Deep State UA continue to mention Nelipivka as the only one that continue to seem to assert much of these actions around here. But of course, there is a possibility that indeed the front line might still actually be there. We can't possibly know for sure. So that's the situation around here. Toretsk, Skibinivka, and Nelipivka. These are the main real actions in this sector. In the New York front. Over the Bakhmut front, there is fighting reported at Minkivka, Chasivya, and Priteshny, reshelling or actions reported at Mykolaiivka. So that's about it in the Bakhmut front. Not particularly important per se. Over in the Siversk front, there seems to be more actions around this sector. Fighting is reported at Serbianka, Vimka, Zvenivka, and Siversk. So we'll continue to take a look at this sector. Siversk front traditionally is the most well commanded and defended front line for the Ukrainians. The Russians lost tremendous amount of troops in the Siversk front, and they usually exchange of these lives for nothing. They didn't really get much. But this trend seems to be breaking, with the Russians continue to make advances in this area here very slowly, but they are making some kind of advances. So we will need to continue to watch, especially in this southern part where the Russians are making progress in the Ivano-Darivka direction and the Vimka direction. So we shall continue to watch to see how this goes. Although personally, I don't think it's necessary to go for sievers, as there's always strategic maneuvers that you can actually take sievers without fighting. Over in the Kreminna front, fighting is reported at Terny, Yampolivka, and Torske. So that's about it. Nothing particularly special. The main action is over in Terny, where the Russians are already inside of the village. With the yesterday's report already mentioned about the Russians entering Terny and making some progress. Slow but steady progress within the small little village here. We move up north. Over in the southern half of the Svetove front, Russian forces are attacking Kharkiv, Novomihailivka, and Nevsky. This is exclusively reported only by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Russian Defense Ministry did not mention about this. However, further up north, there is actions around in the Borova sector. Let's call this the Borova front. Why not? No. So if this is the Pischane front, then maybe this is the Borova front. So because this is the prime target right here, so let's call it the Borova front, and then the southern part here. Yeah, let's continue to call this part of the Svetove front for now. Until I have a better name for it. So over in the Borova front, at the Borova front, Russian forces are fighting in the region of Petrov-Trevneve and Kopanki, with frontline changes being noted by the Ukrainian mapping by Deep State UA. There is fighting similarly reported over in Novoplatonivka, coming from the Pischane front, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. They mentioned Novoplatonivka. However, we do not have the frontline changes to mark how the Russians reach here or have the front line actually change. Usually what we have is the fighting at Bohovslavka. So maybe that the Russians actually have made advances and captured most of Bohovslavka, and that's how they managed to come into Novoplatonivka. That is a possibility, because the last report of fighting was actually just yesterday by the Russian Defense Ministry about the fighting over in Bohovslavka, and we have the Ukrainians, Russians also talking about Zarizove. Ukrainians did not mention about that, seemingly. So how do they reach here? No idea. So it could be just a general direction report. So in the Pischane front, the Russians are fighting at Koliniskivka and Zarizove. So that's all. It's important to note Koliniskivka is mentioned by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. The Russians have already claimed the capture of Koliniskivka. So let's continue to wait for confirmation. Otherwise, in the Kupiansk front, the action is pretty much concentrating around Kupiansk. Fighting is reported at Kupiansk, Kocherivka, as well as in the region of Kindrashivka, which is important to note that this is actually across the river. The Oskil River is here. So somehow the Ukrainian Defense Ministry never stopped talking about fighting at Kindrashivka. So it's a bit weird. We'll continue to just monitor and see, how the Russians actually fight over there. Did the Russians cross the river? So we move into the Kharkiv front. At the Kharkiv front, there is fighting reported at Voschansk, in the city of Voschansk. This continued to be a stalemate region. Everything come to a standstill around this sector. And there is fighting reported over in Oleksandrivka. So this is probably a cross-border raid in this area here. Otherwise, there's nothing much else. The Russian Defense Ministry mentioned another place called Okovaka. I can't find this place, so it's not mapped here. And we move into the Kursk front. At the Kursk front, nothing over in the Novi Put region, so we can ignore that. So we go into the main Kursk front region, and massive update coming out from this area here. Russian forces, the Russian front line have moved severely in the northern flank, and also confirmation of the southern flank's Russian presence, and there is some slight advance as well. The Russians also finally make progress over in the western flank, where the main counteroffensive is currently happening. So let's go one by one. In the southern flank, we have geolocation of Russian forces finally in just along the Svel River, just across the bridge. This geolocation confirmed Russian presence in this sector, validating the Russian claims that the Russians have done a major flanking operation north of Kurakhove, and this led me to make a judgment call to validate the Russian claims as actual front line. So because there is no Ukrainian geolocation, there's no geolocation of Ukrainian forces in any of this area here, and the lack of Ukrainian offensive actions in Kurakhove also leads me to conclude that the Russian claim is most likely going to be accurate. So that is the current situation at Kurakhove. We move to the northern flank. In the northern flank, there is Russian actions, some kind of counter attack after Ukrainian failed offensive at Kreminna. Russians are now attacking Malaya Lognia. And according to the geolocation I mentioned yesterday in the frontline changes report, I decided to make frontline changes in this area here based on the judgment call as well. So because the Russian forces geolocated into these two locations at Olovka, as well as just off Novaya Sorokina, I projected that the Russians most likely come from the north and the west. And with this area here, the Russian forces basically most likely have made advance after Ukrainians are unable to hold a position around in the north, confirming Russian presence in this sector, closing the entire front line around here. We have not have much of this geolocation of Ukrainian forces around these areas lately, so most likely this is the case. Russian mapping claim that they have taken the grounds in the west and north of Marievka. So this leads to massive update in this northern flank of this Kursk front. So Russians are now already pushing towards Malaya Lognia, which is possible based on this update. So it will clear up the front line quite a bit until we have more geolocation or information to invalidate my judgment call on this front line, because this area here is too lack of information. The two geolocation just cannot be ignored. So that is the current situation in the northern flank. And in the western flank, where the Russian forces are conducting their major offensive or counter-offensive, fighting is reported at Leonidovo, Novoivanovka. Ukrainian forces are counter-attacking in this sector as well. And Russian forces attack Darino and Mykolaivo Darino, with the Russian forces geolocated inside Darino, leading to major frontline changes in this area. The Russian mapping claimed the northern part of Darino as well, north of the river, and Ukrainian mapping also disclaimed presence around Pokrovsk, confirming Russians have captured Pokrovsk. The geolocation at Novoivanovka confirmed that the Russians have taken Novoivanovka as well. So this is also a Russian capture at Novoivanovka. So for the first time in a long time, probably at least a month now, the Russians have finally made progress over in this western flank of the Kursk front. The Ukrainians have conducted valiant efforts to keep the front line as static as possible, but it seems like eventually the attrition take its toll, and the Russians are now finally making progress. Will this compound and snowball into something bigger is unclear. But the Ukrainians are counterattacking at Darino and Mykolaivo Darino to continue to try to hold the line for as long as possible. The Ukrainian lines are firm along the river. Along this river around here, this is the firm line that the Ukrainian mapping have claimed the Ukrainian forces are holding. However, it is a good defensive position, but eventually it may break if the Russians manage to break a breakthrough from the northern flank hitting southward. That is also a possibility, where the Ukraine seems to be struggling right now. So this entire front line is pretty long, is 14 kilometers long. So we shall continue to monitor the situation over in this sector, and that's it. So this is the summary for the day of 992 for the 11th of November. So help to share this video, because the timing of me publishing this video is going to be around where the military summary is posting this video, which means that the YouTube will not push this video much. So you have to help me share. If not, the video is going to do very badly. Especially if you think that the video report is very good for today, help to press the like button, share it. And this is the battle we have to face as DPA Army. So Help me, help you, and I'll see you guys in the next update.